I think that infectious enthusiasm and the energy that she had that really rubbed off on me for causes such as...
July 1st, 2026 changed everything. Prince William stood on the balcony of Kensington Palace and did the unthinkable. He broke a 29-year silence by releasing his mother's final, locked confession. King Charles desperately tried to bury this document, but it was too late. This single raw act left the entire British nation in tears. The locked bureau at Kensington Palace. The heavy mahogany desk sat in the corner of apartment 1A. It belonged to Princess Diana. For decades, the public never saw what lay inside. It remained locked, a silent monument in a quiet room. Prince William kept the brass key in a small leather pouch. He carried it with him for years, through university, his military service, and his marriage. No one else was allowed to touch it. On this specific morning, the palace was completely silent. The clock struck 8. Outside, the London sky looked gray and heavy. William walked into the room alone. His footsteps echoed on the old wooden floors. He did not hesitate. He placed the key into the lock and turned it. The mechanism gave a loud, metallic click. The sound broke years of absolute secrecy. Inside the top drawer sat a single, thick envelope. The paper had yellowed around the edges over time. It bore the crest of Highgrove House. The handwriting on the front belonged to his mother. It was written in blue ink. The script was hurried, slanted, and unmistakable. It was dated August 28, 1997. That was just 3 days before her fatal crash in Paris. For 29 years, the existence of this letter was a rumor. Palace officials denied it. Courtiers smiled and shook their heads when reporters asked. They called it a myth. They said the princess left nothing behind but her standard will. But the rumor was real. The letter had been waiting for this exact date. Diana wanted her eldest son to read it only when she would have turned 65. William lifted the paper. His fingers brushed the rough edges. He sat down in the same chair his mother used to occupy. The room still held the faint scent of her favorite citrus perfume. It was a ghostly detail that made the moment feel incredibly heavy. He broke the wax seal. The red wax crumbled onto the desk like dried blood. The first sentence changed the entire narrative of royal history. Diana did not write about her charities. She did not write about her fashion choices or her public life. She wrote about the crown. Specifically, she wrote about her fears for her children under the weight of the institution. She knew the pressure would intensify as they grew older. Just 2 hours before William opened the desk, a senior aide from Buckingham Palace arrived at the gates. The aide carried a direct message from King Charles. The message was clear and urgent. The king wanted the anniversary events to remain low-key. He requested that William refrain from making any highly personal statements. The official reason was to keep the focus on state duties. The real reason was much deeper. The palace feared what Diana's voice might do to the current hierarchy. William ignored the message. He dismissed the aide without an answer. The tension between the father and son had reached a boiling point behind closed doors. Charles believed the past should stay buried. He wanted the nation to focus on his own reign and his vision for a modernized monarchy. William saw it differently. He felt a duty to the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it made the courtiers. The letter contained a specific detail that no one expected. Diana mentioned a hidden compartment within the bureau itself. William ran his hand along the inner left panel of the drawer. He pressed a small, raised knot in the wood. A false bottom slid back with a soft scrape. Inside the hidden space lay a second object. It was not another letter. It was a small black microcassette tape. A portable recorder sat right next to it. The batteries were dead, but the tape itself looked perfectly preserved. William looked at the cassette. He realized his mother had not just written her thoughts. She had recorded her actual voice during her final days. This created an immediate legal problem. Written documents can sometimes be suppressed by royal executors. Voice recordings are different. They are incredibly difficult to claim as state property, especially if recorded privately. Diana knew the rules of the palace. She knew how the system worked to protect itself. She had designed this loop to bypass every single royal gatekeeper. The prince stood up and walked to the window. Below him, the first crowds were beginning to gather outside the palace gates. People carried bouquets of white lilies and old photographs of the princess. They had no idea what was happening inside the walls. They were just there to remember a woman they loved. William looked down at them, holding the tape in his hand. he made a decision that would alter the course of the day. He called his private secretary into the room. He gave a simple, direct order. The media team needed to prepare a broadcast link immediately. There would be no script approval from Buckingham Palace. The public would hear exactly what was on that tape. Breaking the silent pact with Harry. The phone on William's desk vibrated against the wood. The screen lit up with an encrypted number from California. It was 5 o'clock in the morning in Montecito. Prince Harry was already awake. He knew what day it was. The brothers had not spoken directly in over 14 months. Their relationship had dissolved into formal legal letters and brief, icy public appearances. William picked up the device. He did not say hello. He simply told his brother that the desk was open. The line went completely quiet for several seconds. The distance between London and the United States felt massive, yet the shared history instantly filled the silence. Harry asked if the envelope was intact. William confirmed that the wax seal had been broken. The brothers had a pact. They made it in 2007 during a private dinner at Clarence House. They promised each other that if any final words from their mother ever surfaced, they would read them together. The reality of their current feud made that promise impossible to keep in person. They were divided by oceans, different lifestyles, and years of bitter media warfare. William placed the phone on speaker. He laid the yellowed paper flat on the desk. He began to read the text aloud. His voice was steady, but the pace was slow. Diana's words were direct. She addressed both of her boys. She did not use their formal titles. She called them by their childhood nicknames. That detail alone made the tension in the room shift. The letter revealed a massive secret about the family finances. Diana wrote about a private trust fund she established outside the United Kingdom. It was registered in Switzerland in 1996. The existence of this fund was never disclosed during her divorce proceedings with Charles. She had hidden it with the help of her brother, Earl Spencer. This fund was not meant for luxury. Diana explicitly stated the money was an escape hatch. She wrote that she foresaw a time when one or both of her sons might need to walk away from the monarchy entirely. She wanted them to have financial independence from the sovereign grant. She knew that money was the ultimate tool of control used by the palace courtiers. Harry listened to the words through the speaker. He told William that he already knew about the Swiss account. He revealed that he had received a partial payout from it when he stepped back as a senior working royal in 2020. This admission caught William completely off guard. The older brother assumed he knew every detail of his mother's estate. He realized Harry had been operating with secret information for years. A minor mystery emerged on the envelope itself. Below William's name, there was a faint, erased pencil mark. It looked like a three-word phrase that had been rubbed out with an eraser. William held the paper up to the window light. The indentation in the fibers was still visible. The text originally said, "For William only." This explained why the palace lawyers could not seize the document. Under British heritage laws, a personal letter addressed strictly to an individual bypasses state archives. If it had been addressed to "my sons," it would legally count as an estate document subject to royal oversight. Diana had intentionally erased the phrase later, or perhaps someone else did, to alter its legal status. The erasure allowed William to claim absolute personal ownership. The conversation between the brothers grew sharp. Harry wanted the tape contents shared immediately with the global media. He believed total transparency was the only way to honor their mother's memory. William disagreed. He wanted to control the release. He feared that a sudden, chaotic leak would dismantle the stability of the crown. He was the heir. He had to think about the future of the institution he would one day lead. The discussion highlighted the fundamental difference between the two men. One was trying to protect the system from within. The other was completely detached from it. They argued about the timing of the broadcast. Outside the office, the media team was waiting for William's final clearance. The satellite trucks were already lined up along the mall. While they argued, an alert popped up on the palace internal communication system. King Charles's private office had just issued a revised schedule for the day. The king announced a sudden, unprompted live address to the nation from Windsor Castle at noon. The timing was an explicit attempt to block William's broadcast. The palace machinery was moving to crowd out Diana's anniversary. William told Harry about his father's move. The shared threat briefly united the brothers again. They realized the palace was using its standard playbook. The institution always sought to neutralize competing narratives. Harry told William to ignore the noon deadline. He urged his brother to hit the broadcast button before the king could speak. The tension climbed as the clock moved toward 10. William had to make a choice. He could honor the traditional chain of command and wait for his father's address, or he could proceed with his own plan. Proceeding meant open defiance of the monarch. It would be viewed as an act of treason by the older generation of courtiers. William looked down at the microcassette on his desk. He thought about the 29 years of silence. He thought about the rumors, the denials, and the corporate shielding of the royal brand. He decided he was done waiting. He told Harry to stay on the line. He signaled his media director to initiate the feed. The live stream went active across all major British networks simultaneously. The broadcast did not begin with a royal fanfare. There was no national anthem. The screen simply showed the interior of apartment 1A. William sat at the desk with the yellowed letter in front of him. He looked directly into the camera. He did not look like a future king. He looked like a son who had finally found what he was looking for. He introduced the recording to the public. The audio file, the palace, tried to bury the television monitors inside the BBC broadcasting house flickered. The regular morning programming cut out instantly. A simple text card appeared on millions of screens across the country. It read, "An announcement from the Prince of Wales." There was no background music. There was no introduction from a news anchor. William pressed the play button on the portable recorder. The sound came through the broadcast feed with a heavy hiss. It was the distinct background noise of an old analog tape. Then, a voice filled the airwaves. It was lighter than people remembered, slightly breathless, but entirely clear. Diana began speaking. She gave the exact date of the recording. It was August 29th, 1997. She was sitting in a room at the Ritz Hotel in Paris. The traffic from the Place Vendôme hummed faintly in the background of the audio. She stated that she knew her movements were being tracked. She named 2 specific private security firms based in London. She claimed these firms were hired by people close to the royal household. The facts matched the historical logs. In late August of that year, Diana's personal protection officers had been removed by the state. She was relying entirely on private security provided by the Al Fayed family. The tape confirmed she felt completely exposed. She whispered into the microphone that her mail was being intercepted at her residence. The audio quality dropped for a moment. There was a sound of rustling paper. Diana began to address William directly. She told him that by the time he reached middle age, the monarchy would face a survival crisis. She predicted the public would tire of ancient pageantry. She told him he must not become a distant, cold figurehead. She instructed him to change the coronation oath itself when his time came. This instruction created an immediate constitutional dilemma. The coronation oath is a fixed legal contract. It is governed by British parliamentary law. A prince cannot simply alter it on a whim. Diana was asking her son to challenge the very legal foundations of the state. She wanted him to pledge his allegiance to the British people first and the Church of England second. The tension escalated when Diana mentioned a specific name. She spoke clearly about Sir Robert Fellows. He was her brother-in-law and the Queen's private secretary during the 90s. She alleged that Fellows had warned her privately to stop her international landmine campaign. She claimed he told her that her political profile was becoming too large for the safety of the status quo. The history books show that Fellows always denied working against Diana. He maintained that he only ever sought to protect the institution. But the tape offered a different perspective. It showed the deep paranoia and isolation Diana felt within her own extended family network. William sat motionless as the world heard his mother accuse the old palace guard of systematic intimidation. A sudden mechanical click sounded on the tape. Diana paused. She told the recorder that someone was knocking on her suite door. The tape continued to run for 40 seconds in absolute silence. Listeners could hear the distant muffled sound of voices through the heavy wood of the hotel door. The identity of the visitor remained unknown. The recording resumed with a completely different tone. Diana's voice sounded hurried. She said she had to hide the cassette in her vanity case. She stated that a senior courtier had just phoned her from Balmoral Castle. This individual told her that if she did not return to England immediately, her access to her children would be legally restricted during the upcoming school term. This was a massive revelation. The public never knew about this ultimatum. The official narrative always suggested that Diana was free to spend her summer as she pleased. The tape proved that immense leverage was being applied to her behind the scenes. Her love for her sons was being used as a weapon to force her compliance. William looked up from the desk. He looked directly at the camera crew standing in his office. He did not ask them to stop the feed. The broadcast was reaching over 12 million people in real time. The switchboards at Buckingham Palace were completely jammed with incoming calls from international journalists. The King's planned address from Windsor Castle was officially delayed. The palace press team realized they could not compete with the live audio of the dead princess. Their strategy had completely failed. Charles remained inside his private apartments, watching his eldest son dismantle decades of careful public relations management. The tape neared its end. Diana's voice softened. She told William that she loved him. She told him to look after his brother. She said she felt a great weight of dark anticipation about her journey back to England. Her final words on the recording were a simple request for her boys to remain authentic, regardless of the titles handed to them by birth. The line went dead with a loud static pop. The live broadcast cut back to the studio anchors, who looked visibly stunned. They had no script for this event. They had no pre-approved analysis from royal experts. The raw reality of the princess's voice had completely halted the standard media machine. A nation halts in the middle of the week. A red double-decker bus stopped dead in the middle of Piccadilly Circus. The driver did not pull over to the curb. He simply engaged the handbrake and left the engine idling. Passengers inside did not complain. They were all looking down at their mobile screens or listening to the audio coming from the bus speakers. The regular hum of central London traffic faded into a strange, heavy quietness. Outside the gates of Hyde Park, a group of construction workers stopped operating their jackhammers. They sat on their toolboxes in their bright orange vests. One man held a portable radio on his knee. A crowd of office workers in suits gathered around him. Nobody spoke. A woman in the front row began to wipe tears from her face with a paper tissue. The raw data from the national grid showed an unprecedented spike in internet usage. Network operators reported that data traffic hit levels usually seen only during major World Cup matches. But this was not a sporting event. This was a weekday morning in July. The country was experiencing a collective emotional shock. The voice of the lost princess had bypassed 30 years of media training and institutional shielding. William remained on camera for 60 seconds after the tape finished playing. He did not look away from the lens. A single tear tracked down his right cheek, caught by the harsh studio lighting in his office. His hands were clasped tightly on top of the mahogany desk. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked slightly on the first syllable. He did not read from a teleprompter. He spoke directly from his own memory. He told the audience that he spent his entire adult life trying to balance his duty to the crown with his duty to his mother. He admitted that the two priorities had often been in direct conflict. He stated that he chose this specific birthday to release the tape because he wanted the public to know the unvarnished reality of her life before the historical record was completely rewritten by palace committees. The statement caused immediate panic inside the government offices at Whitehall. The Prime Minister called an emergency meeting with senior advisors. The government had no advance warning of the broadcast. Legally, the Prince of Wales is expected to clear major public statements with the government to ensure political neutrality. William had broken constitutional protocol by acting completely alone. The tension deepened when reporters noticed a glaring detail in the official court circular. Queen Camilla was scheduled to attend a major charity gala in central London at 1 o'clock. 10 minutes after William's broadcast ended, her staff canceled the appearance. The official press release cited a sudden scheduling conflict. The press team did not offer any further explanation. This cancellation sparked immediate speculation. The public knew the relationship between the princes and their stepmother had always been complicated. By releasing a tape that detailed Diana's intense suffering and isolation in the late 90s, William had inadvertently turned the public spotlight back onto the origins of his father's second marriage. Camilla's absence looked like a tactical retreat from a hostile public mood. A small mystery began to develop regarding the television signal itself. At exactly 11:15, the live broadcast link from Kensington Palace flickered and died for 3 minutes. Viewers across the country saw a blue screen with a technical error message. Many assumed the palace engineers had pulled the plug under orders from the king. The facts emerged later that afternoon. The outage was not caused by royal intervention. The sheer volume of concurrent viewers had overloaded the primary fiber optic trunk line connecting the palace media room to the national broadcasting switchboard. The tech team had to manually reroute the signal through a backup satellite link based in North London. The brief blackout only heightened the public's sense of urgency and suspicion. As the afternoon progressed, thousands of people began walking toward the palace gates. They did not form organized queues. They simply stood together on the pavements, holding small digital devices to catch the latest updates. The floral tributes began to pile up against the black iron railings, reminiscent of the scenes from September 1997. William watched the crowds grow from his upper window. He knew the palace press office was currently drafting a counterstatement. He knew his father's advisors were furious. But the reaction on the streets proved that his gamble had worked. He had connected directly with the public, bypassing the courtiers who had controlled his family's narrative for a generation. The emotional weight of the day was visible on the faces of every citizen standing in the London drizzle. The final command from beyond the grave. A thick leather binder landed on the mahogany table inside the Privy Council office at 2 o'clock. The document was a direct printout of the final clauses in Diana's letter. William had his legal team deliver it directly to the government's chief constitutional advisors. The text was no longer just a personal message from a mother to her son. It was a formal challenge to the financial structure of the Duchy of Cornwall. The document outlined an explicit command regarding the private wealth of the heir to the throne. Diana insisted that 70% of the annual surplus revenue from the estate must be diverted into a public trust. This trust would be managed entirely by independent citizens, completely separate from royal control. The money was to be used exclusively for affordable housing initiatives across the United Kingdom. The financial facts of the estate were already a matter of public record. The duchy generated over £24 million in profit during the previous financial year. Under current laws, the Prince of Wales retains full control over how that money is spent after paying standard income tax. Diana's plan would effectively dismantle the financial independence of the heir, turning the private estate into a public utility. This created an immediate institutional crisis. The king's senior financial advisor arrived at Kensington Palace via a side entrance to avoid the press cameras. He carried a ledger detailing the long-term commitments of the royal family's private funds. He informed William's chief of staff that implementing Diana's request would bankrupt several ongoing royal restoration projects and threaten the security budgets of extended family members. William refused to back down. He pointed to the exact clause in the letter where Diana explained her reasoning. She wrote that the monarchy could not survive in the 21st century, while holding vast tracts of land and private wealth amid widespread economic hardship. She believed that giving up financial privilege was the only way to secure the public's consent for the institution's survival. The tension escalated when the discussion turned to the mystery of Queen Camilla's sudden departure. A leaked email from a staff member at Sandringham House surfaced on a major news website at 3:30. The message confirmed that Camilla had arrived at the Norfolk estate alone, leaving her personal protection officers behind in London. She had explicitly requested that no official diary entries be made for her for the remainder of the week. The mystery of her flight was solved by a close associate of the family. Camilla did not leave because of anger or hostility toward William. She left because she realized her presence in London would become an immediate lightning rod for public anger. The audio tape had resurrected the raw emotions of the 90s, and she chose to remove herself from the situation entirely to give the brothers room to address their mother's memory without distraction. Her departure was a calculated tactical move to lower the political temperature. Meanwhile, a second mystery within the audio tape was finally untangled by investigative journalists. Analysts using audio filtration software focused on the 40-second gap where Diana paused the recording due to a knock on her door. By boosting the low-frequency frequencies, they isolated the voice of the person standing in the hallway of the Ritz Hotel. The voice belonged to Comte Richard Dubois, a high-ranking liaison officer within the French Ministry of the Interior. Historical records from that week showed that Dubois had been tasked with tracking foreign dignitaries during their stays in Paris. The filtered audio captured him, telling Diana that a British military attaché had requested a copy of her daily travel logs from the hotel management. This discovery confirmed William's long-held suspicions about the level of surveillance his mother faced during her final days. It proved that foreign authorities were actively participating in the monitoring of her private life under pressure from London officials. The revelation added immense weight to the letter's validity and made it impossible for the palace press office to dismiss the recording as the product of a troubled mind. The king's private office finally broke its silence at 4:45. They issued a brief statement on official stationery. The text did not address the financial clauses or the surveillance claims. It simply stated that the king loved his sons and respected the enduring memory of the late Princess of Wales. It was a weak response that failed to address the massive constitutional questions William had thrown into the public domain. William spent the late afternoon in a closed-door meeting with the Chancellor of the Exchequer. The government was stuck in the middle of a civil war between the king and the heir. The Chancellor made it clear that any changes to the Duchy of Cornwall's financial structure would require a new Act of Parliament. Passing such legislation would trigger a massive public debate about the future of the monarchy itself, a scenario the government wanted to avoid at all costs. William remained firm. He informed the Chancellor that if the government refused to draft the necessary legislation, he would voluntarily surrender his income from the estate every single year as a personal choice. This move would force the government's hand by creating a massive public contrast between his actions and those of his father. The future king was willing to give up his personal fortune to fulfill a command written on a piece of paper 30 years ago. The tearful Vigil at Althorp. A dark Navy helicopter touched down on the damp grass of the Althorp estate at 9 o'clock that evening. The rotors slowed to a stop, casting long shadows across the ancient parkland in Northamptonshire. The Spencer family home sat completely dark except for a single lamp burning in the ground floor library. William stepped out of the aircraft alone, carrying a small leather briefcase. He was met at the edge of the lawn by his uncle, Charles Spencer. The two men did not shake hands. They walked together along the gravel path toward the ornamental lake known as the Oval. The water was perfectly still, reflecting the deep purple of the late summer twilight. A small wooden boat lay moored at the stone jetty, its paint peeling slightly near the waterline. The facts of Diana's final resting place were well established. She was buried on a small wooded island in the center of the lake. The public could only view the white memorial temple from across the water. Access to the island itself remained strictly limited to her immediate family. It was a sanctuary designed to keep the world's curiosity at bay. William stepped into the rowing boat. He took the oars himself, refusing any assistance from the estate staff. The rhythmic creak of the rowlocks was the only sound breaking the silence of the countryside. He rowed steady, cutting a straight line through the green lilies toward the dark shore of the island. The briefcase on the floor of the boat contained the original blue ink letter and the micro-cassette tape. William had resisted pressure from the government to place the items in the state archives at the Public Record Office. He believed the documents did not belong to the British nation. They belonged exclusively to the earth where his mother lay. He stepped onto the soft mud of the island. The trees grew thick here, shielding the central grave from the wind. He walked up the narrow gravel path to the simple stone monument. He opened the briefcase and placed a single wreath of white roses on the stone. It was her favorite flower. Tucked into the stems was a handwritten note from his own children, written in green crayon. The tension returned when William pulled a small brass canister from his coat pocket. He had a specific plan for the tape and the letter. He did not intend to take them back to London. He had brought a specialized industrial adhesive. He knelt by the base of the monument, pulled back a loose piece of decorative stone cladding, and slid the canister into the hollow foundation cavity. This action created an immediate legal paradox. By burying the original recording inside a private tomb on non-royal land, William removed it from the jurisdiction of the Crown executors forever. If the king or the government wanted to seize the physical tape, they would have to legally desecrate the grave of the Princess of Wales. It was a brilliant, final defensive maneuver. A minor mystery developed as William prepared to leave the island. He noticed a fresh second set of footprints in the soft earth near the back of the monument. The boots were small, leaving deep indentations in the moss. No one from the Spencer staff had authorization to visit the island since the morning maintenance check. William followed the tracks to the northern edge of the water. There, lying near a patch of ferns, was a silver fountain pen. It bore the initials of a prominent international journalist who had been investigating the royal family since 1995. The discovery meant the island's absolute security had been breached during the day's media chaos. Someone had risked arrest to photograph the gravesite during the broadcast. The mystery was resolved within the hour. William called the estate security manager via his personal radio. The manager confirmed that a drone had been intercepted over the perimeter fence at 7 o'clock. The device belonged to an independent news agency. Security had confiscated the memory card before releasing the operator. The footprints belonged to a local guard who had searched the island to ensure no tracking equipment had been dropped from the air. The silver pen had simply slipped from his uniform pocket during the sweep. William sat on the stone steps of the monument for 30 minutes. The emotional weight of the day finally caught up with him, away from the television cameras. He looked down at his watch. It was exactly 10:30. Across the United Kingdom, the late-night news programs were leading with the footage of his broadcast. The public reaction was shifting from shock to deep respect for his defiance. He walked back to the boat and rowed toward the mainland. His uncle was waiting for him by the jetty with a flask of hot tea. They stood under the old oak trees, watching the lights of the helicopter flicker in the distance. The day had transformed William from a compliant heir into an independent leader. He had honored his mother's final birthday by breaking the code of silence that had governed his family for generations. The helicopter lifted off into the midnight sky, turning south toward London. Below, the lights of the English villages blinked through the clouds. The nation woke up the next morning to a completely redefined relationship with its future king. He had shown that he was willing to bleed publicly for his mother's truth, leaving Britain changed forever.